Hello and welcome, everyone. So glad to see so many people joining this webinar. I'm very, very excited, and I hope you are too. Today, we're covering a very important session, and I think the session most talked about within students is the visa and compliance. And today we're talking about our premium partner, which is Avila University. And I'm really, really happy today to have with me Dr. Martin, who's going to be hosting the session with me today. Hi, Dr. Martin, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. How are
Wonderful.
you?
Thank you for being here. So Dr. Martin is the Associate Vice President of International Enrollment and Students Affairs at Avila University. And again, for those who just joined us now, we're going to speak today about visa and compliance for Avila University. I know you're joining from all parts of the world, so feel free to keep in the chat where are you coming from today? Where are you logging in? Is it morning, afternoon, or evening? At the same time, the Q&A section is going to be open throughout the whole webinar. If you have any questions for us about any of the topics we're talking about in the webinar, please feel free to leave your questions in the Q&A section. That's Q&A section and not the chat function, please. And with that, let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to give it to Dr. Martin to just speak a little bit about Avila before we jump into the topics about visa and compliance. Dr. Martin?
Thanks so much. Yeah, welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to talk to you about the process of applying for your visa. But of course, I'd love to have the opportunity to tell you about Avila University. We're a small private institution in the south side of Kansas City, right in the heart of the United States. And we have a lot of great benefits of studying with us. We, as a small institution, also have small class sizes, but that equates to big learning opportunities. With a small class size, we are ensuring that you receive personalized attention from your instructors, where instructors will learn your name. You'll have the chance to interact with peers more. And our professors and faculty are also very accomplished. Uh, 70% of our professors have a terminal degree in their field, like PhD or equivalent, but they also blend that with a lot of in the field experience. And so they have a lot of industry experience and connections and contacts. So you'll be learning from people who have been there and done that, as well as achieving these excellent qualifications. So you'll be equipped with skills that employers are actively seeking in the workforce today. Our community is very diverse and inclusive. Our on-campus community is a reflection of the greater Kansas City diversity, and we have students from dozens of countries. In fact, I think the last count was over 60 countries are represented here at Avila University. And also close to one-third of our students are first-generation college attendees, meaning they're the first member of their family to attend college or university and seek a higher education. And so we're very proud to be offering opportunities for students from all over the world and from all different backgrounds to achieve their goals and receive this education. All of our degree programs are designed with a career-ready approach. So while we love that you will come and study with us, we also want you to be successful after you graduate and move on from Avila University and go into the workforce. So our degrees will allow you to graduate with the technical expertise and critical thinking skills, but also all of the soft skills that a lot of employers are looking for, with a lot of our core requirements of our degree programs focusing on management and human resource allocation, where you'll not just benefit from the technical know-how from your degree specialization, but also have a broader set of skills to be successful in your career and have a very quick trajectory towards advancing your career as well. And so the focus of today's webinar, of course, is the process of applying for an F1 visa. It can feel very daunting for a lot of students at first because there's a lot of information and it's a very complicated process. I can tell you that I myself was an F1 student. I came to the United States in 2012, on an F1 visa for graduate studies. So I can speak from personal experience that while it is a daunting process, it is also something that is very achievable once you learn exactly how everything works. So here's a breakdown of the steps to apply for an F1 visa. The first step is to apply to and be accepted to a university that is SEVP approved, which is a university that allows the issuance of a Form I-20 to apply for an F1 visa. All of these institutions are approved by the US government for that purpose. So once you apply and you're accepted, the next thing that will happen is that the institution will issue you the Form I-20. And this is a document which is essentially a formal acceptance document between you, the student, the institution, and the United States government to allow you to apply for that F1 visa to be a full-time student in the United States. Once you receive that, then the process of applying for your visa really begins in earnest. The next step is there is a fee to pay. It's called the I-901 fee or the SEVIS fee. It is something that is supports the database that keeps track of the information for all international students in the United States. And so once that fee is paid, then you can submit the application form for the F1 visa. This form is called the DS-160. The DS-160 is a pretty straightforward form. You would complete all the information on that and submit the application form along with a separate fee for the application filing fee for the visa. Once that is submitted, then you'll have the opportunity to schedule a visa interview appointment at a US embassy or consulate near you. And then you'll attend that appointment and have a biometric screening and interview. When you attend the interview, of course, you'll have with you necessary documents, which we will cover in more detail in this webinar, uh, for you to bring with you and be reviewed by the consulate officer. So the document part usually becomes the most stressful thing. Like everybody wants to make sure that they have everything in order and they have everything that they require. And so let's start with the Form I-20. So for an institution like ourselves to issue you a Form I-20, we require a couple of things first. The first one being a passport, a previous or current passport, but typically you want to make sure that your passport has at the very least 6 months of validity. So we receive your passport, but we also need to receive financial documentation from applicants. This is financial documentation to show that you have the means to support yourself or you have sponsorship to support you, perhaps from family member, to cover your expenses for the first academic year of study. This is an amount which includes all sorts of things that you would realistically expect to require for an academic year of study. So not just tuition costs, but also living expenses, transportation insurance, books, and also realistic personal expenses that you might incur. And the way that you demonstrate that is typically through bank statements, or it could be a letter of support. Paycheck stubs are sometimes accepted as well. It depends on the circumstances, but for the most part, this will be in the form of a bank statement showing available funds in a checking or savings account. So I mentioned SEVIS being the database where we have information on all of the F1 students in the United States. SEVIS is an acronym. It stands for the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System. It's a web-based system run by the Department of Homeland Security, and it maintains information on all non-immigrant students like F1 students, as well as exchange visitors while they're in the United States. So international students will typically require the F1 visa for the full-time degree study. And it is necessary to have the I-20 form in order to pay the I-901 fee. The reason being that the I-20 will have a specific number, which is a unique number for you. At the very top, it begins with an N, and that is something that you will associate with the fee that you pay so that they are paired together. That way, whenever we issue an I-20, when we look at on our side in CVIS, we see the I-20 and we can see that the fee has been paid for that particular I-20. The I-901 fee itself is a $350 fee for students seeking an F1 visa, and it must be paid in order to progress the visa application. Uh, as you saw in the steps in the previous slide, is something that you would pay before you really submit the application form for the visa. You can find out more about the I-901 fee on the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement website. The fee itself is paid on a website online, fmjfee.com. Usually the payments are made through some kind of credit card or fund transfer. They do accept third-party payments, meaning that somebody else besides yourself, like a parent, for example, can pay the I-901 fee on your behalf using that website and paying online. So once the I-901 fee is paid, the next step is the DS-160 application form. This is the actual form to apply for the F1 visa. And so it's something that you will complete and submit. It's all done online. There is a separate fee which is associated with the submission of this form. So that's $185 to submit this form. It's a non-refundable fee, and submitting that form and paying the fee then allows you to schedule the visa appointment. Once you submit the form, you'll receive a receipt with a barcode, and that's something that you must print and have a hard copy to take with you to your visa interview. So that's another important document to remember to bring with you, uh, as well as the receipt payment for the CVIS I 901 fee. Once everything is submitted and you've printed your receipt with the barcode, you can then schedule your visa appointment at the U.S. Embassy or consulate nearest you. These are typically done online through the through the embassy or consulate websites. And we encourage applicants to schedule their appointments as soon as possible because wait times can be quite significant. And depending on what part of the world you're from, they can vary. And so the specific embassy or consulate might have a different time to wait for an appointment compared to somewhere else in your country or in a different country. So keep that in mind. Uh, Depending on what country you're coming from as well, you may be direct to make direct payment to a specific bank, um, or it might direct the student to a specific website from the US government. This will be something that will be given to you as instructions if you are from a particular country that requires you to have that different avenue for paying the DS-160 fee. So just to again recap and break down the US visa application process, once you apply to and are accepted to Avila University, we'll issue you the Form I-20. So once you receive that, you'll be able to pay the CVIS fee, which again is required before you actually submit the application for the visa. Once that is complete, then you'll complete the DS-160 form. That's for an online non-immigrant visa application. You'll then pay the fee associated with the DS-160 to then schedule the visa interview. You'll schedule that interview at the nearest U.S. embassy or consulate to your location. And then when the interview time comes, you'll attend that visa interview and you'll bring with you all of the required documents and you'll answer any questions from the consulate officer at that time. Usually these appointments are very brief. You might find yourself waiting for a long time and having a very short time to actually speak to somebody, which is very normal. You might receive 3 or 4 questions from the consulate officer. At that time, then you'll receive a decision on that visa application. It will either be approved or denied. If approved, then you'll begin to plan your travel and arrival to the United States in time for the start date for your program, then that will be determined by what's on your I-20 and what session or semester that you applied for admission to. Just another important detail to note that once you receive your visa, you're permitted to enter the United States up to 30 days before that program start date. So a lot of our students like to enjoy coming to the United States a little bit earlier, maybe doing some travel, seeing some sights, a little bit of cultural immersion, just kind of getting adjusted and getting settled before their program starts in earnest. And so you'll have that 30-day period uh, to do so, and then you'll be able to make your arrangements for travel with that in mind. So, a recap of the document checklist again for the I-20 to be issued. We require a copy of your passport and also the financial documents which demonstrate the means for you to support yourself or sponsorship to support you for one academic year of study in the United States. And then for your interview appointment, there are a number of documents that you'll want to bring with you. Again, you'll want to bring your passport, uh, current passport, especially with at least 6 months of validity. You want to bring the I-20 that you were issued. You'll notice that on the bottom of the first page of the I-20, there are two sections for signatures. There is the signature that you will see from one of our team of DSOs, and there will also be a section for student attestation. Make sure that you sign and date that once you receive the I-20 so that when you bring it to your appointment, everything is valid and signed. You'll also want to make sure you bring the receipts of payment, so your receipt of the SEVIS I-901 fee. Make sure that you've got the confirmation of that payment with you. You want to bring that DS-160 confirmation with the barcode. Make sure that these are all hard copies as well. And we also believe you should bring with you the same financial documents uh, that you used for us to issue your I-20 in the first place. Several of the interviews might have questions related to how you are financing and funding your studies. So it's important to bring those copies of documents with you to the interview as well. You'll also want to bring any letter of verification and the acceptance letter from the institution as well, just to make sure that everything is in order and that they see that you have been accepted into this program, which, of course, the I-20 is a formal recognition of that, but we want to make sure that you have absolutely everything that you need. So make sure you bring your acceptance letter to Avila with you as well.
And I think there's a question straight away from the Q&A section.
Mhm.
Someone is asking, do the documents need to be only hard copies, so printed and brought to the interview, or do they also need uploaded somewhere?
You should bring with you hard copies of everything. I can tell you that the experience is different depending on which embassy and consulate you visit. And I can tell you, when I applied for visas, I applied for my visas at the US Embassy in London, which they now have a new embassy. But when I first applied, it was a different building and they had different requirements. And one of them was that no electronic devices whatsoever were allowed within the embassy. And that was everything, and even including uh, car key fobs to like lock and unlock your car. You could not take anything electronic or anything with a battery inside the building. And so everything had to be hard copy. I know in the New London Embassy that is a little bit different. People are allowed to bring phones and such, but uh, just keep in mind that it's a little bit different in every single location, and every single embassy has their own rules and regulations. But just to be on the safe side, have hard copies of everything. You won't need to necessarily upload everything, but as long as you have everything with you to present to the consulate officer at the time, then you will be fine.
I can only double that. I remember myself, I already had a visa and I was at the airport and they asked me for the documents and I only had them online and there was no Wi-Fi. You don't want to be in that situation really, so make sure you do have your hard copies for your visa
Mhm.
interview. And thank you for stopping to answer this question. I appreciate it.
Of course. So one of the newer aspects of the visa application process, and this is very recent, is that there is guidance now on the social media and digital footprint for visa applicants coming from abroad. So, one of the things that they are allowed to do now is to review any of your active social media profiles. So the first thing to think about with this in mind is to review your accounts because you'll be asked to list all of your social media handles from the past 5 years. So that's if you're using Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, or Twitter, things like that. You'll be asked to provide all the handles, and they are permitted to review the content that you have been posting publicly to these social media content areas. It's important that you'll be required to set your profiles to public so that they are permitted to view it. Uh, One thing to keep in mind, though, is if there is any suspicious activity with a lot of very sudden deletions of content or any changes that are made suddenly to your accounts or profiles, that looks a little suspicious and might raise some red flags. So it's important not to delete anything, but you can still archive posts as well. What they're looking for is anything that might be considered hostile or extreme or against the interests of the United States. Just to make sure that there's nothing like that on your profiles. And they also want to align with your student purpose. So they're checking to see if what your content is showing is a reflection of genuine academic interests and clear educational goals. So you'll also want to avoid any posts about unauthorized work or any permanent immigration plans. While I can speak from personal experience, I came to the United States as a non-immigrant F1 student, and I've ultimately reached a point where I'm a permanent resident. It is not something that you can express during this process because applying for a non-immigrant visa means that your intention should be to return to your home country. So any discussion of permanent immigration plans will probably result in a denial of your visa application. So keep in mind also that in dealings with the United States government, they don't necessarily have the best reputation for having a good sense of humor. So be mindful that jokes might be taken literally or could be misinterpreted. So it's important not to make uh, any casual remarks or jokes about that kind of thing as well. And so be mindful that when you're on your social media and building your content to build a positive footprint. It's encouraged to highlight academics and your achievements and community involvement, as these are attributes and qualities that are beneficial for your visa interview. And also to keep content consistent with your visa intentions, remembering that this is a non-immigrant visa. This is not you wouldn't necessarily discuss your visa application in the context of moving permanently to the United States because that is not the nature or purpose for this type of visa. So keep that in mind when you're looking at your social media content because they are now permitted to review what you have posted, and also they are required for you. They are permitted to request that you make your profiles public. So making your profiles private will not necessarily circumvent this requirement. So keep those things in mind.
There's quite a few questions coming about social media, and I see that most of them are aligning to the same one question. What if a student doesn't really have social media or hasn't used it in a really long time, let's say 10 years?
That's okay. I myself don't use social media, and so that's fine. The only thing is that if you were to come to this point of the process and you were to perhaps have social media, but maybe you don't want them to see it, and you were to say falsely that you don't, if they were to find that you had a presence on social media, but you said that you did not, then that would be an issue that would result in the denial of your visa. But for those of you that don't have a social media presence, it's not an issue as long as that is indeed the case. And so, what they're looking for, and in terms of social media, this is a very new thing. and it's not exactly the most clearly defined, and we don't have a whole lot of data, but keep in mind that social media can encompass a lot of different things. It could be a YouTube account. Perhaps you don't even post on YouTube, but perhaps you have a login that you sign in to personalize the viewing feed. Perhaps you have a username on Reddit, which a lot of people don't necessarily consider to be social media. These are also things to keep in mind, but for those of you that don't have a social media presence, it's not something to be concerned about if that is indeed the case.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the answer. That's really helpful. There's also a question asking, what if my account was hacked? So just a reminder that if it's a social media handle that has been hacked, there are ways you can raise it with a social media provider as well, asking to remove the account or taking any other action. And if this is the case, I would say don't even wait for the interview. This is something you should be doing nonetheless. And also just remember, internet is forever. I know it's a telltale that our parents and our grandparents told us, but it is, especially in today's day and age where your social media handles are checked by also AI, not only by humans. Just remember when you're posting, be mindful and think about what you're posting because once it's out there, it's out there. And one good advice that I once heard is don't post anything your mother and father wouldn't be proud to see. Post only the things that you wouldn't be afraid um, someone at your job wouldn't be worried to see when you're coming into a job interview. So just be mindful when you're online and be mindful of your online presence.
That's excellent advice and a very good standard to follow.
Well, thank you. Let's move on. And I believe the next topic is before your F1 visa interview. And if we go to the next slide, please. I would like to speak of how we can prepare before the F1 visa interview and what to expect from the interview. Now, Dr. Martin has already rightly said that we don't really know how your specifically interview will look like. It might be two questions, it might be five, it might be just one. That's because there's no set questions really. One of the most common questions I get from the students applying for visa is what I'm going to be asked. Is there a set of questions I can practice with? Can you tell me what students are being asked? Now, the reality is that visa officers don't really have a script, so there are no set of questions. And I know we live in 2026 and going online, Google, ChatGPT, etc., you feel like you can just practice with them and get the set of questions and learn the answers. However, that would lead to yourself being scripted. And scripted students get rejected. They are deemed as non-genuine. So one of the things that you can do is just focus on the areas of where you should be doing research, which we are going to talk about soon, instead of looking for the set questions you might be asked, because those just simply don't exist. Now, the purpose of the interview is to understand whether the students intend to settle in the US or travel back to their home country. Again, as mentioned before in this presentation already, and can the students afford to stay in US during the whole duration of their studies? And just as a reminder, as also mentioned already, but it's really important that for the most up-to-date list of required documents, please check your local consulate website. They do tend to sometimes slightly differ consulate to consulate. So it's really important you do double check it. And if we go to the next slide, what I would like to discuss now is the student preparation. So as I mentioned, there's no set questions, but what do we do then? How do we prepare if there's no set questions? One thing I would like you to understand that an interview is not a test. It's not something where you study history and you know that there's going to be A, B, C type questions and you just need to pick a correct one. There's no such thing as a correct answer. The correct answer is the one where you have done your research, you're a motivated student, and you actually have the intent to return to your home country. So how does it work? I'm going to give you on the screen the most important areas to focus for your interview. That, however, does not mean that these are the only areas, but it's a really good start. Now, when you're doing your research about Avila, about YUS, remember to also compare it to other universities and other countries. Where do you start? To be honest, the very first slide of this webinar and Dr. Martin speaking about Avila, that's a wonderful start. This is where you can start. What actually brought your attention? What why did you chose the university? Come from there, come from the heart, and then start looking online, digging. There's no bad means of doing your research. Do you prefer watching it on YouTube about the university? Do you prefer talking with alumni or current students on social media? Do you go on LinkedIn? Do you go to the website? All research is good research. Now, also remember about your finances. And I know there's quite a few questions in the Q&A section about your finances, so I will cover this area slightly more in depth. Now, number one, what do you need to know about your finances? Who's sponsoring you? If you're being sponsored by someone, that's absolutely fine. What you need to be able to speak about is who is sponsoring you, why, and will they be able to support you for the whole duration of your studies? Now, you will need to provide your bank statements only for a certain period of time, but when speaking about the finances, you might be asked during the visa interview of how you're going to be provided for or providing for yourself for the whole duration of your studies. So be ready to speak about the sponsors of how they're sponsoring you, where the money is coming from, etc. One of the biggest mistakes I hear students do is especially the younger ones applying for bachelor studies, so undergrad, saying that they're not really sure how much the studies cost or living expenses because they don't care. The parents are paying. Well, it's still your future, it's still your education. So even if you have a sponsor, you should know the whole amount of how much is the tuition fee and living expenses. At the same time, practice to speak in US dollars. Do not speak in local currency. When you speak in local currency, you're going to be asked to convert to US dollars. Might be very awkward. I'm pretty sure that very few of us are that mathematically literate to do it on the spot. As Dr. Martin already mentioned, you might not have your devices with you to do so. And if you're doing that, it might also be just awkward and get you visa denial. So just remember your tuition fee, living expenses, your sponsors, what are they doing, how you're financing yourself through the whole duration of the studies. If there's anything that you think that might be deemed as suspicious in your financial documents, such as a bigger lump sum that you know where it's coming from, be prepared to speak about that as well. This is your time to actually speak about it. Your motivation interest, and I briefly covered it. It's not about what you learn by heart. Nobody needs to know how many trees are on the campus or how many windows the building has, which, believe it or not, sounds like a joke, but is sometimes the answers we hear from the students. The visa officers do not need technical answers of what you learned to say by heart. They need to understand why you chose the university. You, not why everyone chooses the university, not a unique selling point, but why you chose the university, why you chose US. Presentation is really important as well. So your dress code and being on time. With a dress code, I'm going to repeat myself. People always ask me, so what's the dress code? Something that would make your mother proud. Again, as with the social media, if your mother looks you up and down and says you look wonderful, that probably means that you're well dressed for a visa interview as well. But jokes aside, formal or semi-formal will do. Also be on time. And I can see from the wonderful audience and in the chat function, everyone putting where they're coming from the world. So I'll be very specific what on time means. On time does not mean 5 minutes later, 30 minutes later, or an hour later. It means be early. Even though when you arrive early, you might still wait for your visa appointment, you still need to arrive early. And I cannot stress this enough. Visa appointments are not that easy to come about. You don't want to lose it just because you're a minute late because you couldn't find parking or your bus was delayed. So be early. Think about living in the USA, how it's going to look like, your travel arrangements, campus accommodation, and if you're bringing any dependents, be ready to speak about it as well. Your future plans are also really important, so think about the ties to your home country and plans after your studies. I'm also going to address here the Q&A section. I saw quite a few questions asking, how do I convince the visa officer about my ties to my home country? There's no good answer here. As I mentioned, there's nothing, no secret spell you can say out loud that would get your visa acceptances. What you need to show is your motivation, your future plans, and something strong that actually ties you to a home country. That could be you're shown into really your research about the university. You just need to convince the visa officer that you are a genuine student, really. Um, So institution details, as I mentioned, the USPs of Avila, the study modules, alumni, professors, etc. I know the question is going to be, do I need to learn everything again? No, you don't need to learn anything by heart. Just make sure you understand what you're going to be learning in your course, understand the USPs of the university and why you are choosing the university. Your work and study history is also important, and as well what is unique about you. But with work and study history and everything else, just remember that whatever you put on the DS-160 form, the DS-160 form is going to be opened by the visa officer while interviewing you. If the answers do not align on what you're saying and what's on the form, you will be denied. So make sure that everything you're saying on your documents on the DS-160 form and what you're saying on the interview actually aligns. Travel details, so previous international travels and travels of your family members is also, you might be asked of them. So just refresh yourself of where you have been. Maybe you had previous visa acceptances, which is a wonderful thing. Maybe you had denials. And if you had denials, be prepared to speak about them and not hide information, to speak about why were you denied, what happened, and what has changed since then, because that might actually also support your case. Remember, don't lie. Visa officers do have a database open in front of them. So if you say that you don't have a previous visa denial and you do, you're going to be denied again because they see that you do have a visa denial. But more about that later. For now, let's go to the next slide. So common interview mistakes, and we're going to go to the first one that I mentioned quite a few times already, that's not enough research. So applicants are expected to have a comprehensive understanding of the university, chosen program, and country they plan to study in. I always like to say you don't just wake up one morning thinking, I want to buy a car, go outside to the first dealership and buy the first car you see. You would think what brand, you would think if you want new or used, you would think your financial brackets is the same thing. You don't just wake up one morning thinking, I would like to have further education, go online and apply to the first university you see. That's not how it works. You definitely did your research and you need to show that you did it. Doing your research is a way to show the visa officer that you intend to study and not just use your visa for any other purposes. Let's go to the next slide. So another thing is providing scripted or generic answers. And this is the one that baffles the students the most. So what is the correct answer to an interview question? How do I answer it correctly? And that's when students try to look for a script, ask for their friends who already have a visa acceptance, ask online, ask their agents, etc., for a script. Now, students with a script, they sound robotic. They're also not able to answer follow-up questions. And it also, more than you think, more often than you think, leads to, to these awkward situations where a student is asked one thing and the answer five. So they're just asked, why did you choose Avila? And they start answering, why US, why Avila, why this course? What am I doing in US? And what is my ties to the home country? And what are my future plans? Because these are the questions they prepared for. Learning a script or preparing for questions takes the natural out of the conversation. And an interview is a natural conversation. Again, it's not a test. So learning answers by heart can really, really hinder you. It's the same with generic answers. If you, for example, saying, I chose Avila University because it has a library, show me a university in US that doesn't. I chose US, I chose US because the US has the best professors. Which one are you talking about? There's so many, and are you sure that US has all the best professors, every single university? So why did you choose Avila then? So generic answers are the answers that either A, make no sense, as simple as that, or B, could be fitted to any university in any country. General knowledge will take you far in life. Uh, Improvising on the spot will take you far in life. Unfortunately, visa interview is not a part of your life where it will take you far. For visa interview, you do need to do your research. However, you need to find a fine line between providing scripted, generic answers and the ones where you did your own research and didn't overdo it really. And with this, we're going to go to the third reason of why students are getting denied. Sorry, Dr. Martin, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just one thing to add on the scripted answers is if somebody is giving a very rehearsed and clearly scripted answer, the impression that that gives is that perhaps your level of English proficiency is not very high. And that is something that also that the officers are keeping in mind when they're trying to admit people to a full-time course of study, especially at the graduate level. And so while you might already have the documents with all your test scores and such, it gives that impression that perhaps your English comprehension isn't great, which could be also be a reason for the denial. So that's just another factor to keep in mind.
And a very good one to add. Thank you very much. Now, the third one is poor communication skills. So you might think that I mean English level, but it's not always the English level that gets you denied due to poor communication skills. Often it's students being nervous enough to answer yes or no with an open-ended question, or the other way around when it's a yes or no question, giving a very lengthy answer or giving an answer to a very different question than you're asked, and which I see a lot as well. Students are asked why Avila, but they answer why US out of nervousness. Now, how to avoid that? Practice, 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 practice. I always say try to practice just with your friends or even with a mirror to answer within 3 to 5 sentences. It seems easy, but try to do it in front of a mirror, and the mirror sometimes can be the harshest teacher. Try to practice to answer questions. Listen to yourself. Do you speak too long? Perhaps your sentences are so long that you're speaking for half an hour to answer a question. No one's going to give you that time. Or are your are your answers too short? So practice your communication skills, and practicing your communication skills will also help you deal with the nerves that I know you will be nervous in your visa interview. It's only normal, it's in the name. But also remember, it's not a test, and practice will help you tame these nerves as well. We can go to next one. So that's information and accuracy. I already briefly mentioned about lying, for example, about your previous visa refusals, or whether it's related to your visa history in general or family ties in US, etc. There's different types of visa refusals, and some of them are easier to come back to than others. Now, the one where you lied to the visa officer, you will not be able to come back from that one because that's a very, very different denial than just deemed as did not do enough research denial. Now, if you do have a previous visa rejection, number one, don't panic. We see students with 3, 4, 5. I think the record was 11 visa rejections and still getting an acceptance after that, enrolling, studying, finishing. So just because you have a visa rejection, do not lose hope. What do you need to do though? You need to look at your visa rejection and try to understand it. Not always will you have the whole explanation of why you were denied, but you will see a tiny code. You can put it on Google and it will say the reason for denial, really. But at the same time, think of what happened during the interview. What could you improve? And how did your circumstances change since the last interview you had, since the last denial? And now, hopefully, if you do get your visa, it's another important part and the one we get many questions for, maintaining your visa status. But I will give this section to Dr. Martin.
Thank you. And that's all of that is excellent advice. And just again, the important thing, like you said, it's not a test. It's an interview, just an opportunity to learn more. And so, yeah, remaining calm and uh, listening to the question and responding accordingly. And that is key. But of course, yeah, once you receive that visa, you will want to maintain that visa. So a few things to keep in mind with that. I mentioned before about the timing of arrival. Anyone issued an F1 or a J1 visa is permitted to travel to the United States and enter the country up to 30 days before their program start date. And that's the start date that is listed on the Form I-20, but it's also the start date that you would have applied for and been admitted to, so that should also be on your acceptance letter. Many students do like to arrive a little bit earlier and take that time to settle in, acclimate, etc. But arriving before the 30-day period prior to your program start date will result in a denial of your entry. So uh, it doesn't really necessarily mean that your visa will be revoked or anything like that. You'll just be asked to come back later. but bear in mind that that flight back as well will also be at your expense. So make sure that you plan your travel accordingly for arrival in the United States. In terms of work restrictions, so the F1 visa is a student visa. And so the purpose of this visa is for full-time study. It is not a visa that's intended for work. So in general, the rule is that students cannot work off campus without any kind of prior permission. There are some types of permission that can allow you to engage in some off-campus employment, which I'll cover shortly. But keep in mind that any student found working off campus without any prior permission, especially, you hear about students who decide that they're going to take a cash in hand job so that there's no paperwork, nothing to trace, and they think that that will be fine. But ultimately, people will find out about these students and know that violating this rule can lead to an immediate termination of your visa, and you'll have to depart the country right away. Those F1 visas are permitted to work on campus up to 20 hours per week during the academic year. That's something that I did myself as an F1 student, and we have a lot of different student worker positions at Avila where students can work for up to 20 hours per week. And that's something that is permitted with your F1 visa as long as it's on Avila campus. Keep in mind if you are bringing dependents with you who would be on an F2 visa, so that could be a spouse or an unmarried child under the age of 21, that your dependents are not permitted to work on the F2 visa, whether on or off campus. So keep that in mind for when you're planning financially about how you would support yourself and your family while an F1 student. It's also important for international students to be physically present in the United States for their classes, even if some of their classes are online or in a hybrid format. Any time where you're enrolled in classes and studying in your classes at Avila University, you have to be physically present in the United States. So you can't have your visa and still be in your home country or any other country outside the US while engaging in your program. You are permitted to travel as an F1 student. We just have to make sure that you receive authorization to do so prior to your departure. So travel is typically allowed during school breaks. So typically that would be summer vacation or winter break or spring break. But there are also, emergencies happen and sometimes people have to depart to deal with a family emergency or a personal emergency in their home country. We have a process for that. Again, authorization was required before you depart. So there are means that you can do this type of travel as long as you go through the processes with our DSO team in advance. Uh, Full-time enrollment is required for fall and spring terms. So if you're an undergraduate student at the bachelor's degree level, that's 12 credits at the minimum. And if you're a graduate student at the master's level, that's 6 credits at a minimum each fall and spring semester. Summer enrollment is typically optional. Many of our students choose to take classes over the summer if they're available to them to do so, if they want to accelerate their progress, but it's also something that they can take a vacation during. But also importantly, academic progress has to be maintained for all students as they go through their programs. So that means you must maintain good academic standing. You must be passing your courses, receiving a high enough grade point average to maintain your enrollment. Because if you fail to meet the academic requirements, or if you're dismissed academically from the university, it can result in a termination of your visa status as well, because you are no longer keeping up with the agreement to be a full-time student per the F1 visa requirements. And also keep in mind that this also ties in with the financial obligations. Students are required to be current and up to date with paying their tuition bills. So that ties in with that because those students who are not up to date with their tuition bills, and if they owe a balance, they'll not be allowed to register for classes for the subsequent sessions. And so that will ultimately mean that you're not maintaining your full-time enrollments and failing to meet your academic requirements. So we want to make sure that you're making this progress as well. I mentioned the off-campus employment options. And so this is what we refer to as CPT and OPT. CPT stands for Curricular Practical Training, and it's a type of work authorization to engage in off-campus employment. It's designed for internships, cooperative education, and any other practical training which is part of your degree curriculum. And so what that means is that the work that you're engaging in must be directly related to your major area of study. For example, if you are uh, studying business analytics and you became a data analyst at a company, that would be related to your major. But if you were a business analytics student and you were trying to work in the McDonald's drive-through, that would not be related to your major. So it's not something that you can just work anywhere. It has to be something that's directly to your related to your major. That component also requires you to enroll in credits for the period in which you're engaging in CPT, so that not only are you getting to this opportunity to have practical experience working off campus, but you're also earning credits which are leading you towards your degree completion. CPT can be paid or unpaid. There are a number of internships in the United States that are unpaid, but it's still something that you can get credit for. Even if it's unpaid, it's still we have a process for authorizing this. It's not something you can just elect to do without any authorization because it's unpaid. So keep that in mind that whether it's paid or unpaid, we still go through the process of applying for CPT. The general eligibility for curricular practical training is that you need to be an F1 student in the United States for at least one academic year. Now, if you are coming into a master's degree program, there are a number of our programs that allow you to engage in CPT before this one academic year requirement, as it's a program that requires you to engage in immediate training. And so that's an exception that's carved out specifically for graduate students at the master's degree level. But for anyone in the bachelor's degree program, you have to be an F1 student for at least one academic year before you're eligible to apply for CPT. And it also, uh, the timeline for when you can engage in CPT can very much depend on your program and its curriculum, as there may be some restrictions, especially at the bachelor's degree program level, for exactly what semester and what stage of your academic career you can engage in this. OPT is optional practical training. It is optional, but we find that the vast majority of our students are very interested in engaging in this. It is a type of work authorization for temporary employment related to your major. Uh, it is something that I myself did. Once I finished my PhD as an F1 student, I did OPT and I was eligible to work for 1 year post-graduation. OPT in general can be pre-completion, as in you can complete some of that during your studies, or post-completion, beginning after graduation. However, just to specify, here at Avila, we only do the post-completion OPT. Uh, this allows students to apply for that 12 months of eligibility to work. Uh, the same type of restriction applies as it did with CPT, in that any work that you engage in during this period has to be directly related to your major. For my specific example, my degree was in music education, and I actually had multiple jobs at the same time during OPT, but I was an adjunct professor of music. I was also a music director at a church, and I also had a couple of different music performance gigs as well. So all of these related to music because my degree was music education. So that's an example of different ways in which different, slightly different positions could still fall under the same connection to the study, but I couldn't have done something like McDonald's drive-through, for example, because it wasn't related to my major area of study. So this is a really good comparison to look at CPT and OPT side by side. So things to keep in mind, CPT is part of the program. It's there in the name, curricular practical training. It has to be part of the curriculum. So you'll be enrolling in credits and earning credits towards your degree completion while you're engaging in CPT, whereas OPT is something that you will engage in post-program completion. So you'll have finished all your program requirements, graduated, received your degree, and then OPT is that 1 year of eligibility to work afterwards. In order to authorize CPT, the first thing that you must have is an offer of employment or internship. Once you receive that, then we can begin the process of reviewing that, determining the alignment with your degree program, and doing the authorization then. For OPT, what you do in this case is you apply for the eligibility for OPT, uh, and that is the starting point. You don't need an offer of employment for that, although we encourage people to have something lined up because there's only a certain period of time, up to 90 days of your OPT 1 year, where you can be unemployed. So we want to make sure that people are hitting the ground running and making the most of that 1 year. In terms of authorization, the DSO team at Avila approves CPT authorization. So it's a very quick process. Typically, once a student submits a request, we typically say 1 to 2 business days. Sometimes it's the same day that you'll receive your authorization for that. To authorize OPT, that is something that you apply to directly through USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. So that can take some time to process, up to 90 days. We've seen some applications take a little longer, and some are a little quicker, but that's something that you apply for separately. There's a window of time in which you can apply for OPT, which begins up to 90 days before you graduate from your degree program, and also 60 days afterwards, so that 150-day window in which you can submit the application. For both CPT and OPT, you're permitted to engage in paid uh, and unpaid work. CPT is, for the most part, is going to be part-time during the school semester, but a lot of our students engage in full-time CPT during approved breaks. For example, in the summer, when they're not taking classes as part of their degree program, they might use that extra time that they have on their hands to do full-time CPT. OPT, you must be full-time in order to maintain your OPT status. Uh, in terms of impact on OPT, anybody engaging in part-time CPT, there is no cap or limit to how much you can do that. You can do that for as much as your program allows you to do. However, those of our students who are full-time CPT, there is a caveat in that if you do 12 months of full-time CPT, you then lose the eligibility to apply for OPT. And so what we encourage our students to do if they're doing full-time CPT is to manage that time so that they're not reaching that 12-month mark. Maybe they do 11 and a half months of full-time CPT, and once they reach that, we tell them your best chance of maximizing your F1 benefits are to stop the full-time CPT. You can continue part-time, but then that will allow you to apply for that OPT at the end of your degree program. And the other thing with OPT is the standard OPT eligibility gives you 1 year or 12 months to work in the area of your degree program. However, if your degree is classified as a STEM degree, which many of our graduate programs are, and a few of our bachelors, there's also the opportunity to apply for an additional extension to that eligibility to work. So that 1 year standard, you can apply for an additional 2 years for a total of 3 if your degree is a STEM degree. And that's something that you would apply for the extension as you approach the end of that initial year of OPT.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I can see already quite a few questions arising in the Q&A section. And I'm just so glad to see our audience so active today and the questions being very, very great for the rest of the audience as well. So I can't wait to dive in. We try to answer as many as you possible to you also by typing the answer. So if you did ask a question, kindly look at the Q&A section. Your answer might already be there. However, with this, let's dive in. And the very first question is actually related to OPT and CPT. So the question goes, I need to convince the visa officer that I will return to my home country. However, does that mean touching the topic of OPT and CPT is a no? And even if I plan to eventually return, so can a student still speak in the visa interview about OPT or CPT, or will that be deemed as something as no ties to the home country, not returning?
I would say that yes, as long as you phrase it in the right way. If you are talking about the opportunity to come to the United States and you're emphasizing that your intention to work in the United States, that can come across the wrong way as it can be deemed that your intention is to come here, your studies are secondary and work is primary, which is not the purpose of the visa. However, if you talk about the opportunities that you are permitted to do related to CPT and OPT and about the experience that you can gain from this type of internship and practicum, especially if you talk about it related to your field and how that pertains to what you will bring back with you to your home country. For example, if you are in artificial intelligence, you could say, I'm very excited about opportunities to engage in internships and practical training at American-based AI companies because they are industry leaders when it comes to artificial intelligence. And that way I can get really great experience to bring back with me to my home country to help advance my career and share all of the knowledge and experience that American companies are doing with my peers and my colleagues in my home country in this field. So it depends very much on how you frame that, but it's not something that you can absolutely not mention as long as you are framing it in the right way.
Great answer. Thank you very much. And let's go to the next question. What if I don't understand the question in the interview right away? What should I do?
Uh,
Any
you know,
advice?
I mean, if you didn't quite catch the question or didn't understand, you can ask them to repeat the question. That's something that a lot of people, when they feel nervous, that they feel like they're not allowed to simply ask someone to repeat a question. That's fine as long as it's just, a one-time ask for a repeat. Um, but typically, the questions that you get in these interviews will be relatively straightforward. They'll be just generally speaking about, why do you want to study at this institution? Why do you want to study in the US? How are you financing your study? So they're going to be relatively easy questions to understand and comprehend. But if you didn't quite catch them when they asked it the first time, because they're going to be behind a screen and talking through a speaker, it might be very easy to just mishear or not quite catch the question. You can ask them to repeat. And so don't feel nervous about that. But also, the questions, you can expect them to be pretty self-explanatory and straightforward in terms of what you're being asked.
I absolutely agree. And really, again, this is a conversation. And if in a conversation you wouldn't hear what the other person's saying, you would ask to rephrase or repeat. It's absolutely fine if you do that here as well. And it's definitely better than trying to answer something that you misheard, because that might be deemed as poor English, as you didn't understand English, when in reality you just couldn't hear. So always be open with a visa officer that you didn't understand or didn't hear the question. Now, the next question, can I go ahead and fill in my DS-160 form before I pay my CVIS fee?
You can. What I would encourage people to do is go ahead and fill the form. Just make sure that you understand everything and that you've got all the fields submitted. That way you'll understand if there are anything that you have questions about or anything that's missing that you might need to go and look up the information or find at some point. Um, Generally speaking, you can submit the DS-160 before you pay the CVIS fee, but it's not something that we'd recommend because it's something that will perhaps hinder you in actually getting the visa appointment when it comes to that point. those who have paid the SEVIS I know 901 fee are deemed to be people who are more serious about their intention for their studies and applying for the visa. So you can review the form and fill it out, but maybe not submit it first. Make sure that you have everything in order to pay the SEVIS fee and then submit the DS-160 formally afterwards. But you can practice filling out the form at any time just to make sure that you're clear on all the fields and information that's being asked.
Wonderful, thank you. Now, there's another quite technical question. Up to what degree of relationship is the definition of family when the student is filling out the form or speaking with the visa interviewer? So let's say, do you have family visiting in US? What qualifies as family?
That's a very good question, and something that we've come across, that I've come across personally with working with applicants, especially in certain cultures, the term like uncle or aunt, uh, often people use that term for someone who's simply a family friend, and they're actually of no blood or legal relation. And so, what we would encourage you to say as family is somebody that's of your immediate nuclear family, like a parent. Uh, but an aunt or uncle, as long as they are legitimately an aunt or uncle, blood or legal relationship, then that would be fine. I wouldn't necessarily stray any further into your extended family from there.
That makes absolute sense. Thank you very much for clarifying. And now another question. How long is the F1 student visa valid for?
That varies from country to country. Some embassies and consulates will issue the F1 visa for 1 year. Some will issue it for 10 years, some for 5. The important thing to note is that the visa stamp itself that you're issued, the purpose of that visa stamp is for entry into the United States. And so it is perfectly acceptable for that visa stamp to expire while you're in the United States engaged in your program, as long as your I-20 still is valid and that your program end date is still in the future. Now, the only issue that that would bring up is if you were to then want to travel internationally, say you wanted to visit home and return. If that were the case, you would have to reapply for that visa stamp and get a renewed visa stamp. But I've seen it vary across different embassies and consulates around the world. They tend to have their own standards, so it will vary. But just note that the only purpose of that is for your entry into the United States. As long as the I-20 itself is still valid, then your F1 status is still valid. The visa stamp itself may expire.
That makes absolute sense. Thank you so much. Now, I see quite a few duplicate questions and quite a few students worried about the one and same thing. What if in their previous studies they failed one course or there was a lower percentage in the course and they still met the GPA requirement, but they're still worried if the visa officer will ask about the previous performance in the previous studies?
I haven't come across anybody that's had any issues with that specifically. I think that our visa officers understand that sometimes that happens. Sometimes you might fail a course and have to repeat it. And once you successfully repeat it and you eventually get to the end of your degree program and graduate, then everything is fine. As long as you're meeting the admission requirements for the institution, then previously failing a course, shouldn't have any negative impact on your visa application.
Wonderful, thank you. And as we're running out of time, I think I see the question that is perhaps perfect one to take as a final one for this webinar. And I love the question. What's one thing students often over prepare for when preparing for a visa interview, and one question they underestimate? What do you think, Dr. Martin?
I think the one that they underestimate the most is why they chose a specific institution. Um, we encourage our students to learn as much as they can about Avila before they go, which is, of course, why we had a little bit of information about Avila at the beginning of this webinar. But we also share information about Avila, all these different webinars that we have through it in uni. And we want to make sure that our students learn more about us because a lot of students, and you already addressed this when you were talking about questions that were asked and about answers given to questions. Why do you choose Avila? Because they have a library. Well, what institution doesn't have a library? I would say that we encourage you to learn more about what makes Avila unique, what makes us different from other institutions, and how that aligns with your goals. So, for example, I mentioned that we have small class sizes. You could say that my personal uh, preference for learning is to be in a smaller environment where I get more interaction with the instructor rather than being in a large lecture hall where I get lost in a sea and I don't get to speak to my professor as much. And in this small class settings that Avila has, being a smaller institution, I see that being a more strongly aligned with my goals and how I learn as an educator. So again, thinking about the specifics of the institution and tying it with your goals. So I think that's one question that gets that gets underestimated. In terms of overestimated, uh, I'm not sure that there's a specific question that really comes to mind in my experience from working with visa applicants, but a lot of it comes down to, like you said, Sally, with the scripted answers. Um, and I'd probably say the one that I think might happen the most is why the United States. Some people might go on a little bit of a tangent into a lot of different areas. They might think that it requires a little bit more than about the United States position in the world economy and global politics. I think that some people need to be more refined with their responses in that question, but um, I'm not sure I can really think of any specific examples where that's created any issues. I don't know what your experience has been.
I think sometimes with the over preparing one, I can only agree it's especially with the wider US, and we sometimes hear such cliche answers that we know that they're not natural. Like US will wait for us with open hands and other metaphors like that. And you can just hear that they're unnatural and learned from somewhere. So that's something where you're, as they say, over egg it. Now, the underestimate ones, I can also agree, is the one where you are the most expecting that question. So for example, why Avila? But also recently, I see students really underestimating the financial questions, thinking that just because I already submitted my financials have been checked by in uni and checked by Avila, I can close the drawer and never think about it again. Well, that's not true. You're still going to have to talk about it likely in your visa interview.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Martin, for this webinar. It has been amazing having this webinar with you. Thank you very much for joining, and thank you everyone else for joining as well and actively participating in today's session. The questions were wonderful, and I hope I speak for both myself and Dr. Martin saying that it was an absolute pleasure hosting this webinar when the audience was so active with such great questions. We'll be sharing the presentation and the webinar recording over the next few days. And for any questions we weren't able to get to you, we'll also send an answer via email. So don't worry. And we're sorry if we were not able to answer all of them during the session. Thank you once again very much, everyone, and hope to see you on our other sessions. And most of all, hope to see you enrolling to Avila University.
Yes, thank you all so much.